2, 1. Welcome back to Voices of the Regenerative Decade here at One Earth Live. I'm Becca Dakini, your host, and today's panel topic is how do we transform festival culture into regenerative culture? I'd like to welcome our guests for our panel today. We have John Liu, Stephen Brooks, Jonah Haas, Matt Siegel, Laura Day, and my co-host Christopher Breedlove. So it's great to have you all join us today for Voices of the Regenerative Decade on One Earth Live. Thanks for being with us, guys. So I'd love to introduce each of you and ask you to introduce yourselves and your work in the festival culture and regenerative movement. Just take a few moments to share what you're up to, who you are, and what your contributions are currently. So I'd love to start with Jonah. Jonah, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Becca. My name is Jonah Gabriel Haas, and I am a co-founder of Lucidity Festival. Lucidity is a transformational arts and music festival that's been going on in Santa Barbara, California for the last 9 years. Appropriate to the theme today, we're telling like a large meta-narrative story with our festival where each year is a chapter in a bigger story. And our chapter 9 theme is Regeneration Earth. And so, you know, I see myself, I'm the marketing director for Lucidity Festival, and I see myself as a storyteller, weaving a new mythos for this time. And so weaving the narrative threads of regeneration seems very important, since we need to be able to dream it in order to do it. I'm excited for this conversation today. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Jonah. Next up, Laura, I'd love you to introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Laura Day. I was the founder of Firefly Gathering, which is a music, art, learning, yoga festival in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's on permanent hiatus these days, but it was a nearly zero waste, on-site composting, leave the land better than we found it type of effort, and helped to shift the perspective of our greater community. I did a number of years of work in sustainability in the cannabis community for a number of years, and now I am the Associate Director of Event Operations at Burning Man, and I'm honored to be doing the work to move the needle on our sustainability goals and become carbon negative and regenerative by 2030.
Wonderful, thank you, Laura. Across to you, Stephen Brooks.
Thank you so much, Becca. What an honor. Yeah, my name is Stephen Brooks, Stephen Ryan Brooks. Thank you, Jonah, for the 3 names. And yeah, I've been in Costa Rica for the past 25 years. I founded a educational retreat center called the Punta Mona Center for Regenerative Design and Botanical Studies. We've been a die-hard plant collecting. We have one of the largest collection of useful plants on earth at Punta Mona. We've been teaching permaculture for 20 years and have had tens of thousands of students come through. I'm also the co-founder of Ecovia Community, Taco Tal Collective, and Alegria Village. Where I live currently, Ecovia, there's 45 families from 22 countries. We have 50 children in the school that the parents co-created, and we just bought 170 acres next door with 120 more lots, and just regenerative reforestation with native trees and hundreds of fruit trees and giant gardens. And the kind of evolving into what we're calling 1001. And 1001 is redesigning the earth 1,001 hectares at a time. And it's merging conservation, reforestation, regenerative agriculture, community education, and festival educational space. So I'm also one of the co-founders, along with Matt here, from the Envision Festival, which we just had our 10th year anniversary. And we've done some really, really trying to raise the bar and just making as little waste as possible, and through our education and it's just the local impact. We're on a rented property, and we've planted thousands of trees on the property. And it's amazing when you look at Google Earth and you see just the overview, how radically different it is. And I think the key is that we need to live where our food comes from. We need to merge. We need to merge reforestation, agriculture, and community together with very blurred lines. And yeah, I'm so dedicated. I'm so excited to be on this panel with all of you. What an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Across to you, Matt Siegel.
Hi, such an honor to sit with this group of people today. I am sitting here at the Mushroom Farm, which is a project that I got my personal inspiration from, a combination of Envision Festival and Stephen Brooks's many beautiful communities. Stephen and I co-founded Envision back in 2009 with a small group of people, and I worked there for 8 years, ultimately becoming the CEO. And we built Envision into an award-winning sustainable festival design, working on things like 0 single-use products within the festival, building with locally harvested bamboo, and as Stephen talked to, really designing the entire property to look and model the feel of a tropical eco-village, rather than your traditional festival with easy ups and carports and temporary structures. That work was really beautiful and inspiring people to reconnect to nature and like finding their purpose in an environment free of traditional social conditioning. But in my personal life, it seemed very surface level that I was working all year to build a community that only lasted for 4 days, and only to tear it down while it was in like its peak flourishing beauty. So had this realization that that was actually the opposite of permaculture in my life. Temporary energy going into temporary things was not well spent. So
Oh, Matt, you're muted.
how long have I been muted?
Only a couple of seconds.
Okay. So I left Costa Rica and landed here at the Mushroom Farm. It's a 753-acre land project, 1 hour south of San Francisco. And we are revitalizing an old Campbell's Soup mushroom factory, which was a monocrop of white button mushrooms, into what could be the future of regenerative agriculture, and looking at bringing in the infrastructure to become power, water, and food sovereign, and then creating the experiences that are festival-like in nature to inspire others to iterate on this model and bring food, water, and energy resilience into their own lives.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matt. Across to you, John.
Hello. Well, I think I may be the odd man out. I have come to this from ecosystem restoration. I began to study large-scale ecosystem restoration after a long career in journalism back in the 90s, and I documented the rehabilitation of China's Lus Plateau, which is the cradle of Chinese civilization. Since then, I've been able to go all over the world, and I've seen that in all the cradles of civilization, it's mainly deserts. And we can, using ecological forensics, understand exactly what happened in these places. And we've been working to restore them in many countries of the world. We've seen very positive outcomes. So we have created the ecosystem restoration camps movement. It now has 23 camps in 6 continents, and it's growing very rapidly. There are many, many possibilities for camps, and I hope the Mushroom Farm and Stephen's work and all of the places, and we've talked recently with Christopher and the Burning Man Leadership Council about combining our work together with the festival work. We do have one festival in South Africa, Green Pop, which has been working for about a decade, and it's very successful in motivating a lot of people. So I look forward to having this conversation. I'm honored that you've asked me, and I certainly hope that this will be the start of a beautiful friendship.
Wonderful, John. Thank you. We hope so too. Breedlove, across to you, my co-host.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. And thanks, everybody. Everyone's already said it, but I think all of you are doing really inspiring work, and it's wonderful to be here with you today. You know, kind of my role these days is I sit as the Director of Civic Activation with the Burning Man Project. And so I really kind of help hold a conversation around communities going out into the world beyond kind of our boundary of where our event goes. And so over the last several years, we've really been experimenting with what it looks like to do things like permaculture action days with the Permaculture Action Network. We'll be working with the indigenous tribes that like the Paiute that live near the Black Rock City event. And we're also starting to have these conversations, like John said, around what could it look like for a regional network of burners, where there are 90 events around the world, to start thinking about ecosystem restoration camps as places where their festivals might be able to be hosted. And so really where my mind is at is I'm interested in what happens when people leave our festival grounds, and kind of like, as Matt was saying, I think, you know, like a lot of people get inspiration in these festival grounds. And then what do people go and do? They might go start things like the Mushroom Farm.
Wonderful, thank you, Breedlove. And I'm Becca Dakini, executive event producer, been a collaborator with a lot of the events that you've just heard of through these amazing producers, I think pretty much all of them. Also weaving with ecosystem restoration camps currently. As an international kind of project manager, I've very much turned my focus and attention to the regenerative movement over the last few years, really seeing the necessity for shifting, I guess, civilization towards one which is taking responsibility for actually finding our place in the web of life as Earth stewards. The last 20 years being prolifically involved as a collaborator in production of different festivals around the world, I've really seen an underpinning of village building culture and this desire to actually live differently than most of the world does. And I really can see such a clear crossover at this point as to what it means for those that come together in village building culture to start actually creating permanent villages and regenerating the land that they're on, coming together in celebration and to build culture and build community together whilst actually living in stewardship and right relationship to the planet. So I think there is a very exciting moment we're in right now where we can cross-pollinate and start, I guess, moving back towards being communities that are celebrating and regenerating at the same time. So that's why I was excited to host this panel today and bring everybody together and just see what comes out of these conversations. I think we're more powerful when we're combined, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other, and we really are all culture makers here, and with that comes a great responsibility. So I think the question is, you know, what kind of a culture do we want to build moving forward from here? We're in a great opportunity right now with this great pause to really reassess the trajectory that we're on. So it's a good time to have these conversations and go into inquiry around who do we choose to be, you know, when the world opens to us again, and how do we move forward building culture and communities in right relationship with our planet. So yeah, wonderful to be with you today, and I will hand back over to Breedlove to kick off with our questions for the panel today.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to roll it back for a moment and imagine that someone who's participating in our panel may not be as integrated into how these worlds kind of come together as some of us have. And I'm thinking that kind of from my perspective, festivals traditionally have been viewed as temporary gatherings. And there's been kind of an underlying tension around the consumable nature of festivals versus kind of this regenerative movement. What do you all think about those kind of inherent tensions in traditional festivals and what the regenerative movement means?
I can answer. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. Can I go ahead?
Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay. So, yeah, you know, I don't think it's either or. You know, I don't think it's either we need to be doing festivals that are temporary or we need to be restoring land. We need to do both. You know, it feels like what festival culture is doing is waking people up to even begin to start thinking that we need to start, you know, massive ecological restoration, you know? So I think, you know, on one hand, we need to be doing massive reforestation and massive global redesigning, and we need to keep waking people up as quickly and as efficiently as we can so that they realize and that they're ready to live into a new world that we're creating. So I think we need to be doing both of these things simultaneously.
I can piggyback on that. I agree. I feel like, you know, festivals often, even though they're temporary, they fit into a larger cycle of a year. Just like ecosystems cycle through a year and we have our seasons. And so it's when we gather together in large groups of people, it's hard to sustain that amount of energy over a long period of time. But if we can come together to honor the cycle of the seasons and to put our energy towards some good work of a regenerative project on a piece of land, I feel like then it's not this dichotomy of, is there a conflict between temporary gathering versus more long-term? If we think about it as cyclical and seasonal, then I think there might be room for greater integration.
Well, may I add something?
Go ahead, John.
Okay. I think that what we've been talking about in the ecosystem restoration camps movement is that we would like every camp to have the ability to host festivals, maybe many festivals on the weekends, and then maybe a big one every year, so that people can come and learn what's going on all the time, and that we can also create a kind of a media network that can communicate about what's happening all over the world. We have some very big differences biologically in different biomes. We also have very, very different social and economic potential in different places. And we have some degradation in areas, for instance, the Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, etc., that are very, very serious for restoration. So we need to come together as a species on a planetary scale. So we're not really just talking about like how do we enjoy ourselves as individuals or how do we work together as a small community. We're really talking about folk and as a meta-organism so that we can ensure that our children and future generations can survive. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity now, but we also have to realize exactly how dangerous this particular moment is. So we're at the turning point in human history and we need to take it very seriously.
Really
Yeah.
good point. Oh, please, Matt, first.
Sure. I think it's just super important to be real about what festivals are. You know, there's word like Envision won the FestX Green Festival Award. Burning Man is like a zero impact event. All of these are extremely impactful on environment and consumer streams. I was asked to give a speech at Envision Festival about how it was sustainable. And I sat up there with all these like bright-eyed festival goers. And I was like, Envision is not sustainable. There's absolutely nothing sustainable about flying to Costa Rica and buying all these things and moving all this stuff to set up a village for 4 days. Sorry, someone's knocking on my door. The reality is that festivals are for inspiration. And you can model what that might be. You can turn people on. But it's only valuable if people go home and change the world that they live in. It doesn't, like, that's not the work. Going to the festival and like pretending to be sustainable for a weekend is not the work. The work happens once you leave the festival.
Yeah, I'd love to piggyback on what you just said. Thank you for sharing that. It's absolutely true that the work happens after the festival, and the festivals are a great opportunity to practice and learn and become inspired by regenerative practices. And I think a lot of festivals, particularly those represented here, are created by design. I mean, for example, at Firefly, we incorporated research around common elements of sustainable, happy, and healthy societies throughout time and across the globe, which was part of my research in college. And we believed that by experiencing all of these elements in one place, that would connect us to a deeper part of our human nature and how we relate with one another and the natural systems around us. And that would activate parts of ourselves down to our very DNA, essentially practicing intentional epigenetics. So our goal with festival culture is to change lives for the better and inspire positive change. And I feel like it's working. And so, you know, bringing together all of these elements, people become to feel more alive and connected than they have anywhere else. And then they crave more and they want to bring that back into their daily life. It gives us hope and motivation for change. And I think a huge missing piece for festivals to be able to have more longevity around regenerative practices is having permanent infrastructure. And that's a piece that Burning Man is realizing and has begun to solve at Fly Ranch.
Well, thank you all. One thing that I'm thinking about as we're talking about the merging of these two cultures is, do you think that there's something innate within festival culture that makes it a potent potential to move into regenerative culture? Is there something about the communities you've all been creating that make it primed for this type of a move?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. It's that like anything is possible and I can be anything environment. So I describe it as like an environment free of traditional social conditioning. Burning Man's the best at it. Like people find their true selves. Envision's good at it because it gets a lot of people out of America for the first time. And then it's like the responsibility of the event producers to demonstrate where they feel the world should go. There's so many gatherings that people come together and you're like, what's the point? Like you have that attention, that audience. It's a really beautiful time to drive it forward and to model. So does gathering inherently drive regenerative culture? Only if it's like the highest value of the event producers. And in some cases with this group, it certainly is. You know, Envision took so much inspiration from the work that Steven's doing in the world. We're like, look how happy the people are. Look how good this feels. You could live with a lot less, but close to your food. And I just took so much like thrill in like learning about that as Envision was coming up. We just kept ingraining it deeper and deeper into our culture that way. So I think it's more about the opportunity than the inherent connection and what you teach when you have people's attention.
John, I'll pass it to you.
Well, I think that you know, we're required to do much more than we've done in the past and to understand the mistakes of the past. So what I've noticed is that when I started to dream about the creation of camps, I rejected it. I thought that's impossible. But when I started to write about it on social media, then hundreds and thousands and then tens of thousands of people seem to be having this dream. And these dreams seem to be manifesting that humanity doesn't, you know, humanity, it's not inevitable that humanity degrades its habitat. It's possible for us to understand. And it depends on what we understand and what we do. So this is a great opportunity for very large numbers of people to get engaged in doing exactly what needs to be done to ensure that human civilization will survive. So this is not just it is great fun to do, and it's greatly satisfying if you see streams that are ephemeral return to be perennial streams, or springs return, or forests or grasslands or wetlands return. Now we're even working on coral reefs and on mangroves at the edges of the ocean. And there's so much more that's happening and all of this information needs to be collectively understood, because the kind of dominant cultural paradigm has been suggesting that the meaning of life is to go shopping. And this is clearly not true. There's more. We're talking about alternative currencies that can help us to really value things. We're talking about very large numbers of people all over the world working together to make sure that the global systems like the climate regulation and natural weather regulation, which lowers the risk of extreme weather events, takes place. So it's wonderful to have energetic and open-minded young people and not so young people able to participate. So I'm excited by this possibility. I think that this is a natural collaboration.
Thanks, John. And Jonah, I'm going to pass it to you before we go on to another question.
Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, I'm noticing that there's sort of two conversation threads that are emerging. On the one hand, I'm hearing a conversation around existing festivals like Envision and Burning Man and Lucidity Festival, and how can they transition into being more regenerative or embracing more regenerative practices. And then on the other hand, which this second conversation I'm much more excited about, and I think the fact that we have John with us today is an amazing opportunity to have this conversation around how can we put the festival production skill set that we've honed at our respective festivals into service towards projects like ecosystem restoration camps. You know, festivals are really good at creating the call and putting the call out and gathering people. Festivals are really good at permanent infrastructure for camps. Festivals are really good at creating experiences that leave people impacted and transformed and inspired to go back into their lives and bring that energy back. And so that second conversation is one that I think that since we have such a limited amount of time, I'm really interested in exploring that with John. And perhaps at a later question, I have a very specific offering of collaboration around the Camp Paradise, which is one of John's ecosystem restoration camps. In preparing for this call, I was doing some research, and I found one of the things that they're looking for, and it's one of the things that we might have. So I'm excited to share that at some point soon.
Thanks, Jonah. So moving on to our next question, we'd love to, hear from you. What kind of regenerative changes can we make at festivals or within the festival culture? And, just to piggyback off that, what examples do we have of how these changes are already happening? Who's already taking action? What kind of examples can we speak of that, are leading the way already? So, the framing once again, how can we, already implement these kinds of practices into our existing structures, and what are the examples of those?
Yeah, I could take it. Yeah, on one hand, it all feels really small. Like the things that we're doing are great. In festivals have a really big impact. That is real. There's nothing we can do to pretend. All the composting, all the minimal waste, it's still a huge impact. In permaculture, we call it transitional ethics. And in transitional ethics, sometimes we spend energy like to go to a festival and travel and fly and use all the gas that it takes. And in the end, the experience is going to have a bigger and a more important benefit for the planet. And I truly feel comfortable in the energy that we're spending to pull off festivals, while I feel like people leave and the impact and the way they change their lives makes it worth it. And on, on that note, sure, at Envision, we have, zero single-use anything. We have, we compost everything. We have the most unbelievable garbage separation system I've ever seen. Like, I still can't even believe it. We're planting like crazy. We're trying to do cool social programs in the area, but again, that's so minimal on the radical, the 7,000 people that are flying to Costa Rica to come here, all that fuel. I think what we need to do in creating these festivals is we need to make them impactful, radically impactful for everyone that comes, so that when they leave, they are not the same people as when they came. And they're going to go out and do bigger and more important things in the world, so that it was worth the energy that it took to get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Across to you, Laura.
Thank you, Becca. I would love to share a couple of the things that Burning Man has been doing, because I think they're very inspiring and inspiring me. For one, we've published a sustainability roadmap that came out last July, and that's a very public statement to our goals. And I think that holds us accountable to ourselves and to our community to achieve them. And that helps to rally all of the intellectual, creative, and financial resources of our greater community. And that will help to develop and scale environmentally sustainable solutions. We're learning from our community and really paying attention to what others are doing that are very successful, be it festivals or regionals or existing communities. And so we're really starting to catch up to this collaborative movement that will take all of us to work on a global scale. We have a few goals, 3 in particular. One is to become carbon negative. Another one is to become regenerative and prototype solutions that we can then test on the playa for farther reaching adoption, and to handle waste ecologically. Those are some pretty major goals for Burning Man. If you've been, but we're looking to essentially make it so that it's better for the ecology of Earth for Burning Man to exist than not to exist, which is a huge lift. And then also with the purchase of Fly Ranch, 3,800 acres of beautiful land that has water, hot springs, geysers. It's just an incredible piece of property. This creates a permanent home for a temporary community, and we get to examine what that looks like in this experiment. And so we get to grow this new direction organically and experience more smaller eco-conscious events and workshops, and who knows where that will take us. And one more piece is that we've partnered with the Land Art Generator Initiative, or LOGI, in order to launch a design challenge to help create functional prototypes of regenerative infrastructure. And those will include things like power, water, food, shelter, and regenerative technologies. And so these prototypes can become part of the infrastructure at Fly Ranch to help to create that permanency of regenerative culture that we're after.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura. Across to you, John.
I would just mention that what I've noticed in my research and in working all over the world is that there's a big difference between biotic and abiotic systems, and that the abiotic systems are usually the ones which people understand better because they're finite. You can put all of the parts into a Excel sheet, and you can make a system, and those are human systems. And what we're really seeing in ecology is that we have massive physical disruptions on a planetary scale to fundamental ecological systems. The water, the soil, oxygen, atmosphere, climate regulation, etc. So one of the most important things for the mass of people who would be interested to join in restoring the earth is to understand exactly what it is that we're trying to do. So when we have functional hydrology, when we have functional soil fertility, when we have biodiversity, we're going to be fine. These are the natural regulation of the climate and the weather and the hydrological cycle, etc. And it's also food security and full employment. It's exactly what we need. So these principles are really well communicated in ecosystem restoration camps. And I think I really appreciate the idea of the infrastructure development, because that's the first step to having functional camps which can help very large number of people to understand what's to be done. So I'm very hopeful by this whole thing. Thanks so much again.
Thanks, John. Across to you, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot of exciting progress has been made, and following ecosystem restorations camps very closely, because without knowing it existed, it feels like we're doing so many similar things here at the farm. Festivals can continue to do better, but in reality, building a temporary city is going to be a lot of bandwidth, to a lot of impact to make up. And something like Fly Ranch is a lot more exciting. And this is like a conversation that I think Becca and Jonah and a few of our best friends started having at an event called Awaken in like 2012. This is where I started having that conversation. I'm sure it existed much longer than that. But how do we bring festival culture and energy towards actually regenerating the land? And in doing so, we can like heal the earth and heal our relationship to how we live with the earth. And also we get to like live in that year round, which is what we're working on doing at the mushroom farm. You know, creating that year-round Burning Man culture on a coastal farm only 1 hour away from San Francisco. Like, that sounds pretty exciting. And, you know, if we can hack that, we imagine getting to live it every day. And, but instead of having to go like load up on your resources before you trek out into the desert, having a fields full of vegetables in your front yard and orchards full of fruit and nut trees on the top of the hill. So really, like, how can we design our lives to be it, like be that thing that we look forward to all year, but every day? And simultaneously in doing so, like, be living in full integrity with our environment and local ecosystems.
Wonderful, thank you, Matt. Across to you, Jonah.
Yeah, I think the contribution that I'd like to make around this part of the conversation is really about the very different challenges that we face as producers or as organizations, depending on what type of relationship we have with the land. When we own the land outright, there's a lot more flexibility and fluidity with the types of projects we can do. Lucidity Festival just rents Live Oak Campground from the county of Santa Barbara, who is actually leasing it from the federal government. And so there's a ton of municipal bureaucracy that we need to wade through when we want to do any sort of give back to the land or regenerative project. And so it's been really important that we have committed ourselves to that property and developed the long-term temporal relationships with the local municipalities and the county to be able to build trust to get to a point where they're okay with us doing anything. And so that's one of the things that I want to stress for any festival producers out here that are looking to create a long-term plan towards being more sustainable or more regenerative, is committing to a piece of land for long-term. Because when I see festivals venue hopping, it's much harder to have a good relationship with that piece of land. And so I think that Burning Man, Lucidity, Envision are all examples of festivals that have long-term relationships with the piece of land that they produce on. And so there are others out there that jump around, and I think that they have much greater challenges to face in terms of embracing regenerative practices.
Thanks, Jonah. Before we jump to our next question, I just want to respond that I am aware of a couple of organizations and festivals that are actively regenerating the land that they're on around the world, such as Green Pop, which John mentioned, but also Regen Festival, which is in Australia, which has been going for many years, which is completely focused on tree planting. And I was actually a co-founder of Transplant, which doesn't exist anymore, but was basically outdoor festivals that were all focused on tree planting. And I'm hoping that we can see more of these initiatives where we're having festivals where we're actually doing plants, where we're actually regenerating the land we're on, whether we're cleaning it up or planting new forests, but to leave something, to leave a legacy behind on these properties, if they are temporary sites, would be very beneficial. And it's great to see more festivals and organizations taking this work on. So yeah, I hand back over to Breedlove.
Thanks for the reminder that there's a lot of people in this space, and it's also a global movement, Becca. I think that's important. To I think kind of maybe start to round us off, to step into maybe some future visioning. I'd love to hear from each one of you about what's your dream in the year 2030 about regenerative festival culture could look like. What does it mean if we've actually all started to do this work and all started to inspire more people to come into this movement with us?
I can go ahead. So yeah, I mean, I think creating replicable models that merge all of this different work, that merges festival reality, merges reforestation, merge regenerative agriculture and processing, merges local communities and the labor force to make these things happen, merge, growing wood and bamboo for future buildings. And my vision for the 1001 is to host a 5-day event for 1,000 people once a month. And it's, more conference than festival, music at night, but the focus would be the workshops. And yeah, I think just, when you give people a taste of something so freaking magical and delicious that they never want to go back to the way it used to be, it's like, we just have to set up this new global redesign that incorporates how we live, how we build our homes, where our food comes from, how we pay the workers that grow our food and how they benefit and who's winning. Yeah, I don't think it's actually that complicated. I think the key is we need to merge our sectors. Before it was like reforestation was so focused on reforestation, and then there's festival culture happening, and then there's, food reality happening, and then there's the fair trade movement. It's all one movement. And I think if COVID has brought anything to this world, I think that's what it is realizing that this is all one movement. And yeah, I'm feeling so inspired. Thank you for all the work you're all doing.
Thanks, Stephen. I'll pass it to you, John.
Well, I just feel like in 2030 or now or all the time, we have to live the change we want to see on Earth. So we basically know what we need to do. And I think a lot of people are starting to focus on this, but it has to be the central intention of human civilization to restore the Earth. If we don't do that, then I think future generations are seriously at risk. And, we see that what we understand and what we do has meaning, and it gives our lives purpose. And it's exactly what is needed for not only humanity, but for other species which are dependent on what we understand and what we do now too. So I think we need to choose life and choose love instead of this darkness, this materialism, the nihilism that's crept in and made the society a little bit hairy. So, we need to be joyous and maintain that, and not fall prey to the kind of unhappiness that's surrounding us now. So living the dream is what we need to do. Thank you.
Living the dream, John. I'm going to pass it to Laura.
Thanks. I suppose right now at this moment, I'm dreaming about all of the beautiful big brains and problem solving skills that we all share, and funding support, and directing it towards the most important problem in the history of our species. I see individual communities beginning to organize themselves and creating the map and prototyping templates that can be emulated and encouraged over time. And I think that it's hard to project, and I left my crystal ball downstairs, so I can't really look and see what 2030 is going to look like, but I am starting to see these templates and ideas coming through, and it's super inspiring to see networks beginning to decentralize and reorganize in a way that that localizes our production and consumption and caring about one another in a more communal way, in a more cooperative way, and expanding our global informational infrastructure at the same time. So it's like localizing at the same time as globalizing, and recognizing that both of those elements are important and leveraging both at the same time. And it's a weird time in history where everything kind of has to happen all at once, all at the same time. And so diversifying our strengths and skills, I see this happening more and more, and these conversations that were happening here are absolutely part of the solution. I think a main focus of this movement is understanding the psychology of change, because we have all of the science, we have all the information, but we don't really see the action, and that seems to be one of the greatest hurdles. We have solutions, we're just not implementing them just yet. So I like to think about it as an ecological assimilation of our culture, and starting to really spread these values and understanding that the solutions are there, and really generate the support to start to implement those. And recognizing that, we're the ultimate influencers, ironic, but we are the ones we've been waiting for, and, we can do this. And we're iterating, and there's something new every year. That's one of the beautiful things about festival culture, is we get to redesign and re-implement every single year. We get to improve, and we know that the best solution, the best way, has not yet been created. So I'm really interested in following these threads of very inspiring templates that are being designed as we speak.
Snaps to the best is yet to come. I really like that. Matt, I'm going to pass it to you.
I believe that festival culture, particularly that was designed to be the most inspirational, needs to shift from temporary city building to regenerative village creation. And this is my dream behind us, and it's very inspired by a lot of these festivals that we've been talking about today. And so what if there's a place that is fully abundant and regenerative, and instead of having to build a facade of that, people get to come and live in it for that 4 days or a week, and see it in action and participate in those systems and learn how it works. Think about how deeper the inspiration can be when there's a working model that you can touch and feel and interact with, and see all the opportunities you have to take that home and iterate on it. And so we've developed a model that does work in that fashion here at the Mushroom Farm. And it's not in San Francisco or Silicon Valley by accident. We're here instead of a doomsday bunker in New Zealand or the BC mountains, because in this bioregion, within an hour of here, we have the people creating the technology the rest of the world is interfacing with. I believe they're the most influential populations of humans on the planet. And I believe they're the most nature disconnected as well, very technology addicted. And to create, but they know Burning Man's cool, right? Because they're in San Francisco, and it might be a little bit too hard for them to get to. So imagine like an easily accessible version of that they can come to for the day or an overnight, and really touch and feel what is possible, what a future looks like. And then ideally, like, it is so abundant that when we open source all of it and how we do it, it can be iterated on all over the planet. How do we create food sovereignty, energy sovereignty, and water sovereignty all in a way that generates revenue to support a village, and abundance of all of those things to share.
Low barriers to entry for people to see the dream. I like that too, man. Jonah, I'm going to pass it to you.
Yeah, I think I'd like to weave some of these dreams together. You know, within our networks, we have these amazing land projects like the Mushroom Farm. There's, I think I counted 19 ecosystem restoration camps across the planet. Burning Man's Fly Ranch, and a number of more come to mind. Festivals have the skill sets to create temporary gathering zones that leave people with like very big heart impact. And so building off of Stephen's dream of a monthly gathering of 1,000 people, I could imagine international collaboration of producers and land nodes where we mastermind a tour that produces 1,000-person gathering on a different activated land node once a month that tours the planet. And, you know, we call it Regenerate the Planet. And it brings energy to each of these land nodes. And it will be up to the people who are holding down those land nodes to figure out what is the project that we have that we can employ the minds and hearts and hands of 1,000 people over 5 days. And how can we create the biggest positive regenerative impact with that energy in that amount of time? And so we take it on tour. I mean, you look at One Earth Live, the international collaboration that's represented there. If you look at all the partners, we know how to bring this level of collaboration together. And so just getting the right voices at the table, I think we could orchestrate a tour like this sooner than 2030. And I'm in for that.
I purposely was going to call on you last, Jonah, because of your narrative weaving. So I appreciate you building that vision. You know, I want to say I love the vision that all of you put out there. And I feel like so much of it overlaps with what I feel is just like resonant in me. And, you know, just for me as a reflection real quick too, I think that part of this regenerative conversation in my mind is about what it means for us all to become land stewards. And I know that for me as well, when I kind of project my future into 2030, I imagine a culture that we've all been able to build together where we are really stewarding this land. And part of the healing that also happens is that we start to create better and better connections with the original land stewards and the indigenous people who walked this land before us. And I just want to call that out because I know for me, that's also part of this about us coming back to the land is coming back to the people who have been here long before any of us. So Becca, I'm gonna bring it over to you to take us home.
Thanks, Breedlove. Well, what a fantastic conversation. I guess I'd just like to add my visioning, and it's a conglomerate of all of yours. And Jonah, yes to collaborating on organizing a tour. And I'd love to see how we can create more of an alliance between all of the festivals and to really take responsibility for the fact that we are a culture and make sure that we're closely aligned and sharing information and best practices and, you know, working together. And maybe even there's a charter that we create amongst ourselves, you know, to actually ensure that this work gets done collaboratively and we all push it forward. So there's something I think to be said for joining forces and working as a collective, which excites me. So that's something I would really love to see. I guess I hold a vision of permanent festival sites as like educational, you know, eco retreat / art music kind of like venues and centers where people can actually come and have these events and actually learn skills and learn to village build and potentially even have residency in some of these spaces so we can learn to actually live in a different way together and actually really redefine and re-inhabit the village, I guess you can say, which is an inspiration by Jamaica Stevens. But yeah, these greater visions like you have, Matt, you know, of what is it to build together and live together and be in village, which is why I think we all love festivals so much, but also celebrate our existence and learn to live in harmony with the planet. So I'm hoping to see a network dotted around the world of these centers and permanent locations where we can actually continue to build our culture. And I really would love to see a very strong foundation of that, with working with the original peoples and traditional landowners of those places, with them really teaching us how to steward again and find our way back into the web of life as stewards, as Breedlove said so beautifully. So, you know, I think partnerships like with ecosystem restoration camps and, you know, the festival movement would be very beneficial. For, you know, working with the best who know how to implement these regenerative practices would be extremely powerful. So I think, you know, let's weave together, let's become a super network and ecosystem that combines forces and works to regenerate our beautiful planet together. And also create healthy communities for ourselves, because we need it and we need each other. And I consider you all part of my community. So thank you for joining me in this conversation today. So yeah, I'll wrap out because we've run out of time now, but I so appreciate each of you for being a part of the conversation here on One Earth Live. Any final couple of words you'd like to add before we close out? I'll just open the space up for any extra additions.
Well, I would just say that we need to make sure that we are agents for peace at this time. I think it's, you know, we have a great opportunity to restore the earth, but I think there are some other forces in the world that are working in a direction. I think we need to rally everyone together and ensure that we have a peaceful world in order to do this.
Yes, John. Yes, John. Global redesign, baby. Let's all get ready and join for the global redesign. We are it. This is the time. It feels like the whole world is ready. So let's all dream big and put on our scuba gear because we're going deep.
To quote a mutual friend of ours, John, Tim and Allison Sexauer, our goal is regeneration through celebration.
Yes to that. Any other final comments? No? Okay, it's a wrap.
I just want to appreciate you, Becca, for bringing such a wonderful group together. The reality is that no matter like how powerful our groups are, Burning Man, Envision, ecosystem restoration camps, none of us can do this alone. And I see you and a lot of the people that we're working with as leaders unifying all the people doing this work. Because even as it grows, we're such a minority in the world. And the more that we can collaborate and share resources, that's the best pathway to success.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Matt. Well, happy to be in service. And, you know, as I said, I love you all and I love the work that everybody's doing. And I think the more that we work together, the more powerful we'll be. So, yeah, it's what the planet needs right now. Any final words, Breedlove?
You know, I would just say one reflection I've got in this moment is that, you know, in the current moment of COVID, everything's in chaos. And I tend to find my friends who have been in the production world suddenly are surfing in a culture that they've been used to this entire time. And in a lack of large leadership with solutions, all of a sudden duct tape and grit is what's gonna solve it. And so I'm just seeing our cultures and our communities really step up in this moment. And I believe we're gonna continue to step up. So thanks all for being here.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to wrap out. Thanks again for being with us, everybody. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure. And I hope this is the beginning of many conversations and collaborations. I'm Becca Dakini, your host here at Voices of the Regenerative Decade. Thanks for joining us at One Earth Live, and thanks to all our amazing panelists today.